There is a video. It is 2 minutes and 57 seconds long. It was recorded on January 31st, 2013, by a security camera inside an elevator at a hotel in downtown Los Angeles. The footage is black and white. The image quality is ordinary. The kind of resolution that surveillance cameras have always produced, functional rather than precise. The person in the video died that night, or sometime close to it. The footage was released to the public on February 14th, 2013. In the years since, it has been watched hundreds of millions of times. It has generated more analysis, more theories, more dedicated online communities than almost any piece of true crime footage in internet history. It has been examined frame by frame. The elevator buttons have been mapped. The timestamps have been studied. The body language has been interpreted by professionals and amateurs and everyone in between. And 13 years later, we still do not know what those 2 minutes and 57 seconds mean. I want to be clear about something before we go any further. This video is not going to tell you what happened to Elisa Lam, because I do not know. Nobody does, with certainty. The official record says one thing. The physical evidence raises questions the official record does not fully answer. The internet has spent over a decade constructing explanations that range from plausible to harmful. What this video is going to do is something simpler. It is going to tell you who Elisa Lam was. It is going to walk through the footage with you, slowly. It is going to lay out the physical questions that have never been answered. And it is going to sit with the weight of not knowing, which is, I think, the most honest thing anyone can do with this case. Stay with me. Elisa Lam was 21 years old. She was Canadian, from Vancouver, British Columbia. She was enrolled at the University of British Columbia, studying something she had not yet fully decided on. She was one of those students who found the edges of disciplines more interesting than the centers of them. She read widely. She thought carefully. She had a blog on Tumblr called Nouvelle, where she wrote about books she was reading and places she wanted to go, and, with unusual honesty, about what it was like to live inside her own mind. Elisa had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. She wrote about this on her blog, not constantly, not as a defining characteristic, but openly. She described the texture of depressive episodes. She described the particular quality of good days. She was not hiding it. She was processing it in public, in the way that some people need to do. She was managing. Her doctors had prescribed a combination of medications. She was keeping her appointments. She was, by the accounts of people who knew her, doing the difficult daily work of living with a condition that did not make her life easy. On January 26, 2013, Elisa flew from Vancouver to San Diego. She had planned a solo trip up the California coast. San Diego first, then Los Angeles, then Santa Cruz, where she intended to visit a bookstore she had read about online. She had saved for this trip. She had told her parents about every stop. She called them every day. That detail matters, not because it tells you anything about what happened later, but because it tells you who she was. A daughter who called every day. A person who was accountable to the people who loved her. Someone who understood that her parents worried and who made a specific daily effort to tell them she was okay. From San Diego, she traveled north to Los Angeles. On January 26th, she checked into the Cecil Hotel at 640 South Main Street in downtown Los Angeles. The room rate was $65 a night. The Cecil Hotel opened in 1924. I want to take a moment here, before we get to what happened, to tell you what the Cecil actually was. Not the internet version, not the mythology, the documented record. The hotel was built during the optimistic years of downtown Los Angeles, designed to attract business travelers and tourists to a city that was still figuring out what it wanted to be. It was large, 600 rooms. It had a lobby that, in photographs from the 1920s, looks genuinely elegant. Marble floors, high ceilings, the architecture of a place that expected to matter. What it became, over the decades that followed, was something different. Its location, near what would eventually be called Skid Row, the concentrated zone of homelessness and addiction in downtown Los Angeles, meant that as the neighborhood changed, the Cecil changed with it. By the 1960s and 1970s, it had become a budget hotel with a documented history of suicides. Guests jumping from windows. Guests dying in rooms. The police were called to the Cecil regularly enough that the staff had protocols for it. The name Richard Ramirez appears in the Cecil's record because it is documented fact. The Night Stalker, one of the most prolific serial killers in California history, lived at the Cecil in 1984 and 1985, during the period when he was committing his crimes. He would return from his attacks, pass through the hotel lobby, and go upstairs. Hotel staff described noticing blood on his clothing on at least one occasion. The name Jack Unterweger also appears in the Cecil's record, an Austrian serial killer who traveled to Los Angeles in 1991 and murdered 3 women. He stayed at the Cecil while doing so. These are not ghost stories. These are not the product of internet speculation. They are police records, court documents, the verified, official history of a building that Elisa Lam checked into on January 26, 2013, carrying a $65 a night room booking and a plan to continue north to see a bookstore. She had been there 5 days when she vanished. January 31st, 2013. This is the last date on which Elisa Lam was seen alive, according to every verified record available. Hotel staff saw her that day. She appeared, by their accounts, to be acting somewhat unusually. Her original booking had been in a shared hostel-style room, but her roommates had complained about her behavior. Notes left on pillows, locking them out of the room. Staff had moved her to a private room a few days into her stay. None of the staff accounts describe anything that would constitute a formal safety concern. Just someone who was a little different, a little unpredictable. That evening, the security camera in one of the hotel's elevators recorded a 2-minute and 57-second sequence. I want to walk through it with you. Not quickly, carefully. Elisa enters the elevator. She is wearing a red hoodie and dark shorts. She presses multiple floor buttons, several of them in sequence, as if testing or mapping something. This is the first detail that has never been satisfactorily explained. Not one button, several. She steps out of the elevator. She looks down the hallway to her left. She looks to her right. She steps back in. She steps out again. She appears to speak, or to gesture. Her hands move in a pattern that people have spent years trying to categorize. It has been described as playful, as frightened, as the movement of someone communicating with another person, as the movement of someone in a dissociative episode, as someone who simply had an expressive physical manner. The camera sees her hands. It does not see what, if anything, she is responding to. She gets back into the elevator. The elevator doors do not close. This is the second detail that has never been satisfactorily explained. The elevator, responding to the buttons Elisa has pressed, should be operating. The doors should be functioning. And yet, for a significant portion of this footage, they remain open. Elisa stands in an elevator that appears to be waiting. She eventually moves toward the doors. She looks out again. She leaves the frame. The doors close. That is the footage. 2 minutes and 57 seconds. That is everything the camera recorded. Of Elisa Lam's last documented moments, when LAPD released this footage 2 weeks later, they did so because they were searching for a missing person and needed the public's help. The footage spread within hours across every platform that existed in February 2013. By the time Elisa's body was found 5 days after the footage's release, it had already been watched millions of times. Now, the questions. I am going to present these as questions because that is what they are. Not accusations, not conspiracy threads. Questions that the documented physical record raises and that the official investigation did not, or could not, fully answer. Question 1. How did Elisa get to the roof? Hotel manager Amy Price testified to the following. There are 4 ways to access the roof of the Cecil Hotel. 3 are exterior fire escapes on the sides of the building. The 4th is an interior door leading to the rooftop, equipped with an alarm that activates when the door is opened. There is no documented record of the rooftop alarm triggering on the night of January 31st. There is no surveillance footage of Elisa on any of the fire escapes. There is no surveillance footage of Elisa on the roof. She was found on the roof, in the water tank. Her path from the elevator to that water tank is not accounted for in the available record. Question 2. How did Elisa get into the water tank? The tank was a large metal cistern. To access it, a person would need to climb a ladder on the outside of the tank to reach the top, and then open a hatch cover. The hatch cover was described as heavy. The coroner's report and the investigation's findings do not include a detailed analysis of the physical mechanics of how a person, specifically Elisa, in her physical condition alone, could have opened the hatch, entered the tank, and closed or left the hatch in the state it was found. When Elisa's body was discovered, the hatch was open. Whether she opened it, whether it was already open, or whether it was opened by someone else at some point, was not established. Question 3. What did the autopsy actually determine? The official cause of death was accidental drowning. Bipolar disorder was listed as a significant contributing factor. The manner of death was recorded as accident. The coroner's report included a critical notation. Elisa's body had been in the water tank for approximately 3 weeks before it was found. Decomposition had advanced to the point where a full toxicological examination of her blood was not possible. The coroner could not determine, with certainty, what medications were in her system at the time of death, at what levels, or whether any toxic substance was present. The official ruling stands, but the coroner who made it explicitly documented the limitations of the evidence available to make it. Question 4. What happened on the internet? This question belongs here, because what the internet did with the Elisa Lam case is part of the case's history, whether anyone intended it to be or not. When the elevator footage spread, theories spread with it. Most were benign. Speculation about the elevator malfunction, about her mental state, about the hotel's history. Some were not benign. A death metal musician who performed under the name Morbid became the target of sustained online harassment. His stage name and his promotional photographs happened to align with details that internet theorists were using to construct a suspect profile. He had no connection to Elisa Lam. He had no connection to the Cecil Hotel on January 31st, 2013. The harassment was documented, prolonged, and severe. He was eventually forced to release a public statement. His social media presence was effectively destroyed for a period. He was an innocent person. The internet's collective attention, directed at an unsolved mystery with no clear answers, found him and decided he was part of the answer. He was not. This is also what the Elisa Lam case is. Not just an elevator, not just a water tank, But the thing that happens when a mystery enters the internet, and the internet decides it needs to be solved, regardless of the cost. In June 2013, the Los Angeles County Coroner released its official findings. Accidental drowning, bipolar disorder as a significant contributing factor. The investigation was closed. Elisa's parents filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the Cecil Hotel in September 2013, alleging negligence. The lawsuit was eventually settled. The terms were not made public. The Cecil Hotel eventually closed, underwent renovation, and reopened under a different name. The elevator footage remains online. It has been watched at various counts, somewhere between 300 and 500 million times. I want to go back to something before I finish. Elisa had a blog, Nouvelle. She updated it regularly. Books she was reading, things she was thinking about, the texture of her daily life. She wrote about her mental illness with a directness that was unusual and, I think, genuinely brave. She was not performing vulnerability. She was documenting her experience of being a particular kind of person in the world. In one post, written some time before her death, she described what it felt like to manage bipolar disorder day by day, the effort of it, the medication, the way some days were simply harder than others for reasons that did not reduce to anything external. The strange work of being present in your own life when part of your brain was making that presence difficult. She was 21 years old. She called her parents every day. She was traveling alone toward a bookstore in Santa Cruz that she had read about and wanted to see. The official record says she died accidentally, in a water tank, on the roof of a hotel, with a documented history of death, on the last night of January 2013. I cannot tell you that the official record is wrong. The coroner had access to the physical evidence and made a determination based on it, while acknowledging the limitations of what could be examined. That is what forensic science does. What I can tell you is that the footage still exists. 2 minutes and 57 seconds. Elevator buttons pressed in sequence. Doors that did not close. Hands that moved toward something the camera did not capture. Was she alone? The camera was in the elevator, not in the hallway, not on the roof, not at the water tank. I do not know. Nobody does. And I think the most honest thing to do with that, the most respectful thing, to Elisa, and to the weight of not knowing, is to say it plainly. We have the footage. We have the official ruling. We have the questions that the footage and the ruling together still do not answer. And we have a 21-year-old woman from Vancouver who called her parents every day, who wrote honestly about being alive, who had a bookstore she wanted to visit. Remember her. Not the mystery, not the footage, not the theories. Her.